Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. About 3 months ago, I did a fairly significant root prune to one of my jade plants, simply for the reason that I wanted to keep it in the same size pot. When you have a lot of houseplants like I do and you have a small house, you cannot continuously upsize a plant into a larger pot every time it needs to be repotted. So I wanted to do a little bit of an experiment and chop off the roots and then place it back in the same size pot. So today I want to show you how that plant is doing, maybe do a little bit more pruning on the plant, and then I'll show you some other jade plants that I have as well. I basically cut off 2/3 of the root system on the plant that I'm going to show you, so let's check it out. Here is the plant today and it's looking absolutely wonderful. It's getting a bunch of new growth on top. I forgot to mention that another reason why I repotted it is because the soil was very compact, it was very dense. You could not stick a pencil or anything in it, so you can see how nice and loose the soil is after doing the repot. So it had not had any fresh soil for about 3 years, so that's why I did the root prune as well as giving it some fresh soil. So it's looking nice and healthy, getting tons of new growth everywhere. I was honestly expecting some leaf drop after doing the massive root prune, but I don't think I lost a single leaf off the plant. It responded really well. That's what makes these plants in particular a fairly good bonsai tree, is just because they don't need a large root system to sustain a plant this size. Jade plants or succulents in general have a fairly shallow root system. This one, just because it was in the same size pot for a number of years, it actually consumed the entire pot with the root system. So when I chopped it off, I was actually quite nervous about massive leaf drop, but it responded really well, and it just continued to push out some new growth. I have done some experiments on other plants, particularly pothos. I have done some pretty significant root prunes with those plants, and again, with similar results. There was really no change in how the plant appeared and how it responded. It just continued to push out new growth. So I'm hoping to experiment with other types of plants and the amount of roots that you can cut off before you start to see any drastic changes with the plants themselves. That just goes to show you, and I keep saying how resilient plants are. You can cut off like 2/3 of a root system and it's not going to affect the plant. Now, with that being said, I always advise caution. I do this with my own plants. I can't tell you exactly how your plant is going to respond if you cut off the root system. I guess a general guideline is if you're doing a root prune simply for keeping it in the same size pot, I would try and cut no more than 1/3 of the root system. So if you have a pot this size, I would only cut off maybe like the lower third of the root system, put some fresh soil in the bottom, and then give it a chance to adjust and acclimate to that cut. And then just continue on with basic care after that. Another factor is the conditions in my home are probably greatly different than yours. I have these plants basically in direct sunlight or full sun throughout the day, so that's going to help with the speed of growth or the rate of growth as well as root growth. If you happen to have yours in kind of like that medium light, so the end result might be a little bit different. So yeah, just take that with a grain of salt. I'm not saying to go chop up all your houseplants and take off all the roots and they will be fine. There's going to be a margin of error there as well. Some plants, they don't like to be root pruned or they don't like to be repotted. Each plant is going to be different, but so far with my experience, jade plants and pothos respond really well to a moderate root prune. Now, before I show you the other two jade plants, one of them actually had a fairly significant root prune like this one. I just want to talk about shaping a jade plant into a tree-like structure. Now, I'm going to start off by saying you do not have to prune a jade. It's not absolutely necessary. It will branch out naturally. I do it so that I can manipulate a jade plant to grow in a certain way, which I'll talk about in a second. This plant, along with the two other ones that I'll show you here in a minute, actually came from a jade plant with multiple stems in one pot. This is the mother plant. It's probably about 16 or 17 years old, and I've maybe taken about like 50 different cuttings that I've propagated over the years. I've given them away, and I just like to learn how the plant grows if I prune it in a certain way. These plants are about 6 years old now, and every spring I prune the tips off just so I can promote branching. Anytime you make a cut, and I'm going to use this branch right here, anytime you make a cut along the stem, it will produce 2 branches. So you can see right here, this is where I've made a prune and it has pushed out 2 branches. And you can see when you make a cut, so if I cut the top off, this stem right here, it will produce branches on the same size as these leaves. So you can see right here, this is where I made a prune and 2 little branches have sprouted from the same sides as the node with these leaves on it. So that's how you can manipulate a jade to grow in a certain way. So if I want branches to fill out in this area, I know I'm going to have to cut just above these leaves because I will get a branch from this side and one from this side. If I wanted branches to go from the opposite direction, so I wanted one going in towards the plant and one towards the outside, then I would cut off this section of leaf, these two leaves at the top here, so that the branches will be on the same sides as these leaves. So you'll get one from here and one from here. So that's how you can manipulate a jade. Now 95 to 99% of the time that will work. You can see I've made a cut here and it's only got one branch. There should have been another branch on this side. Now whether that was knocked off or it just didn't produce one, I don't like the way this looks. So it has kind of like a little jut out. There should have been two branches here, and it did the same thing at the next node up top here. So it should have another branch on this side. For whatever reason it doesn't. I don't like the way this branch looks, so I'm probably going to cut it back here. So before I even start a prune, I just kind of plan out how my plant will look if I prune it in a certain way. I often get questions about if you can prune a woody portion of the stem, and the answer is yes. The problem is the growth on the woody portion of the stem, or the new growth, will be much slower. So that's what I did with this branch right here. It is a fairly thick woody portion. I made a prune right here. It did produce two branches, but you can see the branches themselves are much thinner, and it just kind of looks a little bit on the awkward side. Now, as this branch continues to grow, obviously it's going to start to develop some woody portions like it is right there, and it's also going to thicken up to the point where it will probably reach the thickness of this. But for right now, it's kind of in that awkward teenage phase. It just doesn't look good. I think the reason why I cut this branch off is because it had a lot of leafless nodes, and it just was like one long bare stem, and it was actually pulling down on this section of the plant. So I cut it back pretty drastically, and I wanted it to branch out in this area just to fill this out. So right now, when I turn the plant, you can see there's a lot of growth on this side. It looks really bare on this side. So unfortunately, that's just, it's gonna look a little bit awkward. Now I can prune this back a little bit just to kind of even it out, which I probably will do, because over time with the new growth on the leaves and the larger stems, it's going to pull down on this side, and eventually you may have some bending or drooping branches. So if you have any droopy branches, that sort of thing, then pruning is going to solve that as well. So yeah, there's many different reasons why you'd want to prune a jade plant, not only to promote branching, but to, I guess, strengthen up the branches themselves as well as the main stem of the plant. This thing's pretty thick, beefy, and everything looks good. So I like to stand back and just observe the overall structure, starting with the canopy just at top. I want to make sure that it is a nice uniform, almost like a rainbow type structure at the top. Just with the new growth, it is a little bit uneven just in the middle. That's not terrible. It's when you get one long branch off the side, like this one right here. It's sticking out quite a bit, so I might prune that one back, and then I like to rotate it around this way, just making sure that it's uniform 360 degrees. So overall, it looks pretty good. Again, you just have to imagine there's another branch right here, but overall, it's pretty good. And yeah, so I may do just a little bit of pruning. Nothing drastic. So I'm going to come to this stem right here. You can see it branched out right here, and it has 1, 2, 3. It's working on its 4th node. Now, to get a nice dense canopy, I try not to let the branches get more than 3 nodes. So this is 1, 2, 3, and then it branches. So maybe every 2nd or 3rd node, I will make a cut. So now I'm looking at this one right up top here. So it branched out there. There's 1 node, there's 2 node. So I'm actually going to cut off just the tip of these leaves right here, just like that. So now I will get branches from here and here on the same sides of the leaves. And now back to this awkward stem where it should have branched out in 2 areas. And again, for whatever reason, it's only got 1 branch right there. I'm going to come back 1 node, and I'm just going to cut this one off. So it should promote branching from here, and it should sprout a new branch or a new stem from that node as well, and hopefully it branches out. Another portion of the plant that just doesn't look right is this little stem right here. It is sprouting from basically the base of the stem. So I'm going to take a utility knife and I'm just going to slice that off. I'm not going to cut into the main trunk of the plant, or I don't want to, so I'm going to cut just in between the trunk and that last node. And I'm just going to slice that off, just like that. Now quickly back to this main stem right here. Here is 1 node, 2 node, 3 nodes. I'm going to cut this right here so that it can branch out this way, and then this one I'm going to do the same thing. It is 1 node, 2 node, and just above that I'm going to cut these leaves off so that it'll branch out and continue to fill in this area. And like I said, pruning will help strengthen the stem right here as well. This one, it's got a 1 node, 2 node, and it actually branched out naturally. I don't like the look of this one, but I'm going to leave it for now. Now I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment with this THICCLY cloning paste. I've never used this. This was actually suggested by a plant friend of mine, the VeryPlants on Instagram. She suggested that I give this a try in some of my videos. So this is a hormone cytokinin. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And when you put it on a node, it's supposed to promote cell division and branching or new growth. This is, I guess, specifically made for orchids, like Phalaenopsis orchids, and it gives a bunch of other different types of plants that you can use it on. I'm going to try it on a node on my jade tree here, see if I can get a branch in this area. So it does look maybe a little bit bare right here. So I'm going to place a little bit of this THICCLY paste right here and we'll see what happens. So it comes in this little bottle and it has a little wood applicator. This just looks like a little jar of honey, to be honest, or wax. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this THICCLY paste just on the end, and I'm just going to rub it on the node. It says for Phalaenopsis that you're supposed to cut into the node, but I'm just going to place it right here, just smearing it along that area. I don't know if this is the correct way or not, but we will find out. Yeah, I think that should be good enough. Here is one of my other jade plants, and this one is absolutely massive. It's got a big, thick, chunky stem, and it is looking absolutely beautiful after pruning. It has a nice shape to it, a nice tree-like structure, and as you rotate it, it looks very uniform. Everything is growing very nicely. There's no one area that looks longer or awkward in any way. I do get some questions about this little tire swing from time to time. This is actually a gift from a few viewers in New York. They sent me a little care package one time, so I just have a little tire swing on there. But overall, like, everything looks absolutely fantastic. I could not be happier with this tree, and I just can't believe how thick this stem is. It's grown really well. So I did notice one area which I'm going to show you here in a second, but another thing I wanted to talk about is sometimes you will get some lower leaves falling off. So you can see everything else looks really healthy. Everything looks nice and green, very plump, but you can see these two leaves are starting to shrivel up and die off. So sometimes that is just a natural progression of the plant growth. And I know there was one area where it had a yellow leaf right here. So this is what it looks like when a jade leaf is dying off. You can see it's starting to turn yellow and it shrivels up, and you can just easily pull on them and they will come right off. So I like to throw these out. They are no good to propagate. And yeah, here's another one. Actually, this is the stem that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But if you do get the occasional leaf that looks like this one, it's yellow and it falls off, there's no reason to panic, even if you have a few of them. So here's another one. It's starting to shrivel up and yellow. I'm just going to take this one off. Just peels off nicely. This one is ready for the trash. You cannot propagate it, or I wouldn't suggest propagating it, just because it is quite a dehydrated leaf. You can see this is what it looks like when a new branch comes in. So it looks like two little leaves. They look like two little hands just poking out of a leaf. I think they look pretty cute. Right here as well. This is probably where I've made a prune. You can see two small little branches popping through there. Same with this, so that's what to expect. Again, branches are on the same sides as the leaves just below it. Okay, now looking at this structure right here, there's two branches that just jut out from each side. You don't see branches out in the wild with just one straight horizontal branch on each side, so not natural. And eventually, as this continues to grow, the weight of the leaves is going to pull down on the branch and it's going to be growing downwards. So that's another rule that I use for pruning my jade plants, is that I prune off any branch that grows downwards. So I'm just going to get close to the stem. I'm just going to cut that off. Same with this one. Okay, I'm just looking at the tree structure and I'm going to cut this one off as well. So unfortunately that does open up this area a little bit, but if that kiki paste works, then you know what, actually I might put a little bit on this stem here as well. So now that I'm video documenting this, I might put a little bit right here because it looks like there is a tiny little bud trying to pop through there. I just looked on the box just to make sure I'm not supposed to wear gloves. I probably should, just because it's a little bit sticky on the applicator here, and I just want to make sure I'm not going to grow like an extra finger or something like that just by getting it on my hands. But here goes nothing. Just going to spread it on that node, on that little bud, just like that. And we'll see what happens. I just have to bring my measuring tape out as well. I just want to see how thick that stem is. So it's about like a good solid 2 inches on that. Through the whole base, including that lower branch, it's probably around 3 inches. And let's see how tall it is. I'm guessing 2 feet. With the pot and the plant, so it's there. So we're sitting about 2 feet high. Last time I showcased my measuring tape, it was for my birds of paradise, and I accidentally left it out in the rain, so it was quite rusty. I think I did get a couple comments on that rusty, disgusting measuring tape. I always laugh at how much people notice like the small details in my videos. So for those that didn't like my rusty measuring tape, got a fresh one for you. Okay, and here's the last one. It's a little bit smaller than the other two. This is the one that I did a fairly significant root prune on as well. Did not lose any lower leaves, and everything looks absolutely beautiful with this one as well. You can see it's branched out in a number of areas. This one, yeah, it's done really well. So I do have all 3 of these plants very close to my south-facing window. The last one I showed you, it basically sits on a plant stand right in my south-facing window, so it gets full sun throughout the day. If you have your plant off to the side of a window and you want it to get brighter light, just make sure that you slowly transition it to a higher light or direct sunlight location. Otherwise, you may get a little bit of leaf burn. Same thing with taking it outside. If you want to take your jade plants outside for the summer, make sure you put it in full shade, and then just over the course of maybe a week or two, just slowly introduce it to higher light so that you don't get any leaf burn. When you take a jade plant outside, it also adjusts to the heat. We just don't get the 32 degrees indoors. I have an air conditioner in my house here, so it does not get to be 32 degrees indoors like it does outside. So not only does it need to acclimate to higher light, it also needs to adjust to the heat and humidity and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm not going to do any pruning with this one. I'm just going to let it continue to grow, and you can prune throughout the growing seasons of spring and summer. But if it's growing in the winter, like my jade plant downstairs here underneath the grow light, or even in natural sunlight, if it's growing or showing signs of active growth, then you can prune any time of the year. Like I did the root prune, I pruned it in the middle of winter at the end of February, and it did just fine. I did not lose any leaves. It responded well. If it's getting good light, then prune away. If it's showing growth, then you can chop it up. You can, yeah, it'll be fine. You can also fertilize in the winter months as the plant, or if the plant is growing as well. Now I'm going to talk about stem and single leaf propagation. The process for both methods is identical. So when you have a stem cutting like this, I like to remove the lower leaves off so that you have a section of stem like this. You can let it callus over for a couple hours or a day, and then you can just literally stick it in a container of soil like that. And I'm not oversimplifying this when I say don't do anything, just leave it alone. Don't give it any water or anything. The only thing that you want to provide this is a sunny area or a bright spot. The plant will use all the moisture and nutrients that it stores in the leaves to root itself. So for about the first 10 to 14 days, I will not water or do anything with the plant other than provide it a bright sunny area. After about 10 to 14 days, I will lightly pull up on the cutting. If you feel resistance, then it is rooted and you can lightly water. Now I'm not going to like completely soak the soil. You just want to water enough so that there will be a little bit of moisture that gets down to the roots. You will probably lose a couple leaves. They will shrivel up and die off. That is completely normal. But over time, or over a few months, when you water it, you let it dry out, you water it again, these leaves will, I guess, return back to normal. They will plump up and they will look fine. So it might look a little bit rough for the first month or two. Just give it time, it will root itself. You could literally just throw this on the counter and it will grow roots in probably a few weeks. These are pretty crazy plants, and that's why I like learning off of them. Same thing with the single leaves. So I took these leaves off of the lower portion of the stem. This one's a little bit soft. I don't like that. So I'm going to take maybe these two leaves, something like this. You want to use a healthy, thick, plump leaf. You can let this callus over for a day or so. I don't, and I just put it on a soil like that. I don't water it, I don't do anything for it, I just watch for the root development, and eventually you'll see some new little growth points, like right here. So whenever I have a jade leaf that just falls off, I will lay it like that. I won't push it in the soil, and eventually it'll push out roots, and then it'll start to develop a little growth point. And if I pull up on this leaf, it's in there. There is resistance, it's not coming out, and you can see there are two little stems that form from the end of the leaf. Same with this one here. You can see two little stems, and that's how you get an entirely new plant from a single leaf. Now, the only time it gets water is when I water this plant. So sometimes I will just completely soak the soil, and you'll see a little leaf floating around. Once the water goes down, it'll set itself down on the soil. I don't mist it or anything like that. I just leave it alone. Eventually this leaf will get very wrinkly, it'll shrivel up, and then you can pull it off, and that's what I've done with these ones right here. So this is a cutting which was grown entirely by a single leaf. I always try and mention in my jade and other houseplant pruning videos that it is completely normal to feel terrified pruning a plant. I was petrified when I first pruned this one. I thought I killed my plant, but obviously it responded very well, started to branch out. So you just learn how a plant grows after pruning. You're not going to kill your plant, and as I'm trying to showcase on my channel here, that I can cut up a root system, I can cut branches and leaves, and plants are super resilient. So it is normal to feel scared to prune a plant. I was the same way. Even with plants that I have minimal experience with, or like some of my expensive plants, I'm still extremely nervous to cut them up. But that is just the process that I take with my plants. I like to learn how they grow, how to propagate them, and all that kind of stuff. So I just want you to know that it is completely normal, and hopefully you learned something about root pruning, shaping jade plants, as well as propagating plants. So I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. If you have any other comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Thanks again for watching my videos and supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Bye.